There are talents that shine briefly, burning out before they can truly leave their mark. Then there are those who dominate their division with an iron grip, carving their names into the annals of history. But every so often, a rare figure emerges, someone whose impact transcends their sport, whose legend is built one devastating moment at a time. Alex Pereira's journey from the slums of Brazil to becoming one of the most feared fighters in combat sports is nothing short of extraordinary. His story isn't just about victories inside the cage. It's about a man overcoming his demons, defying the odds, and proving that true greatness is forged in the fires of adversity. The story of Alex Pereira begins 37 years ago in São Bernardo do Campo, Brazil. Raised in poverty, he was forced to abandon school as a teenager to work in a tire shop. But the wages weren't always paid in cash. Often, they came in the form of alcohol. What started as casual drinking soon became a vice. And by the age of 18, Pereira was in the grips of a full-blown addiction. His brother wasn't as fortunate. The streets of the favelas had claimed another victim, and his death from drug and alcohol abuse was a stark reminder of the harsh reality that surrounded them. With no future in sight and the weight of loss bearing down on him, Pereira was at a crossroads: succumb to the darkness or fight his way out. His salvation came in the form of sport. A friend introduced him to kickboxing, and while he lacked formal training, there was something undeniable about his raw power. Those in the gym quickly took notice. His hands were like stone, his kicks thunderous. The transformation was swift. Coaches encouraged him to compete, first for extra money, then as a legitimate career path. Little did they know, they were witnessing the rise of one of the most formidable strikers the world would ever see. Pereira's ascent in kickboxing was meteoric. He fought 26 times, winning all but 2, most by knockout. His striking was brutal, calculated, efficient. He was on the verge of cementing his legacy as one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. But even as he stood under the brightest lights, the shadows of his past still clung to him. The addiction hadn't left. It merely hid behind his success. And when he suffered a devastating loss, it became clear. This was a battle he could no longer fight alone. His coach, Wera, saw the toll it was taking on him. I could see he was fragile. The drugs and alcohol had weakened him. He wasn't weak as a fighter, he was weak inside, Wera recalled. It was then that he took Pereira through a ritual, a special indigenous cleansing ceremony meant to rid his body of toxins. What they discovered in the process was even more profound. Pereira was a descendant of the Pataxó tribe, warriors of the past whose blood ran through his veins. From that moment, he embraced his roots, his identity, and, most importantly, his rebirth. His hands, hardened by struggle, were now known as Poatan, a name that meant hands of stone. With renewed purpose, Pereira returned to the ring. He wasn't just fighting opponents anymore. He was fighting for something greater: his ancestors, his people, his legacy. His connection to his heritage became a source of strength, and with that, his dominance in kickboxing reached new heights. But there was something else stirring, something beyond the ropes of the ring. MMA was calling, and the promise of even greater challenges lay within the unforgiving cage of the UFC. His first foray into MMA wasn't smooth. He debuted against Kemuel Atoni, and despite his striking pedigree, he found himself caught in a submission. A loss in his first professional fight was humbling, but it wasn't disheartening. He knew MMA required more than just powerful hands. It required adaptability. He returned to kickboxing, but the itch for MMA remained. Over the next few years, he kept refining his skills, adding new weapons to his arsenal. He was no longer just a striker, he was evolving into something much more dangerous. In 2016, Pereira's path crossed with that of Israel Adesanya. The two met in the kickboxing ring, and while Adesanya was seen as one of the sport's most technical strikers, Pereira proved to be his kryptonite. In a controversial decision, Pereira won their first bout. A rematch was inevitable, and when it happened, he didn't leave it to the judges. A devastating left hook sent Adesanya crashing to the canvas. It was a knockout that haunted Adesanya, a moment he wouldn't forget. As Pereira continued his reign in kickboxing, Adesanya transitioned to MMA, making waves in the UFC. He became the middleweight champion, silencing doubters and building a legacy of his own. But as fate would have it, Pereira wasn't done with him yet. In 2020, Poatan made his long-anticipated return to MMA, signing with the UFC. The moment he entered, the storyline wrote itself. The man who had twice bested Adesanya was now in his domain, and Pereira wasn't here just to compete. He was here to conquer. His UFC debut was electric. Andreas Michailidis was the first to feel the power of Poatan, falling victim to a brutal flying knee. The hype was real. The UFC wasn't wasting time either. Within months, he faced top-ranked Sean Strickland in what many saw as a fast-track title eliminator. The result? Another devastating knockout. Pereira wasn't just winning, he was dismantling elite competition. Then came the moment the world was waiting for. UFC 281st, Adesanya versus Pereira 3, this time for the middleweight title. For 4 rounds, Adesanya controlled the fight, using his experience and precision to keep Pereira at bay. But Poatan only needed one opening. In the final round, he unleashed a flurry that sent Adesanya reeling. The referee stepped in. The belt changed hands. Pereira had done it. In just his 7th professional MMA fight, he was now the UFC middleweight champion. But Adesanya wasn't done. A rematch was inevitable. UFC 287 saw the two meet once more, and this time Adesanya flipped the script. A perfectly timed counter sent Pereira crashing to the mat. It was over. Adesanya had reclaimed his throne. But for Pereira, this wasn't the end. It was merely a transition. He had conquered kickboxing. He had conquered middleweight. Now it was time for a new challenge. Light heavyweight beckoned. His first test, former champion Jan Błachowicz. It was a grueling fight, but Pereira edged out a decision victory. With that, he earned a shot at the vacant title. Standing across from him was Jiří Procházka, a warrior in his own right. The fight was brutal, but in the end, Pereira stood victorious once more. He was now a 2-division UFC champion. His rise was nothing short of legendary. In just a few years, he had gone from a kickboxing icon to one of the most dominant forces in MMA history. But his journey is far from over. Heavyweight looms on the horizon, another mountain to climb, another challenge to conquer. And if history has shown anything, it's that when Alex Pereira sets his sights on something, nothing can stand in his way. This is Poatan. This is the story of a man who defied the odds, who embraced his heritage, who turned pain into power. And as long as he fights, his legend will only continue to grow. The story of Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya is not just a rivalry. It's a saga that transcends the octagon. It's a tale of 2 warriors whose paths crossed in the most dramatic fashion, creating one of the most compelling narratives in combat sports history. From the streets of Brazil to the bright lights of the UFC, their journey is a testament to resilience, ambition, and the unyielding pursuit of greatness. But to understand the depth of their feud, we must go back to where it all began, a place far removed from the glitz and glamour of the fight world. Alex Pereira's story starts in the favelas of Brazil, where survival is a daily battle. Growing up in a neighborhood riddled with crime and violence, Alex learned early on that life doesn't give you handouts. Bullet holes marked the walls of buildings, and the sound of gunfire was as common as the chatter of children playing in the streets. It was a world where danger lurked around every corner, and the police were as much a threat as the gangs. For Alex, this was his reality, a harsh, unforgiving environment that would shape him into the fighter he is today. The death of Alex's older brother was a turning point in his life. It wasn't just a personal loss, it was a wake-up call. His brother's passing, a direct result of the violence that plagued their community, forced Alex to confront the harsh realities of his surroundings. He knew he had to find a way out, not just for himself, but for his family. Dropping out of school to work odd jobs, Alex took on the responsibility of providing for his loved ones. But deep down, he yearned for something more, a way to escape the cycle of poverty and violence. It was during this time that Alex discovered kickboxing. At 21, he was considered a late starter in the sport, especially compared to others who had been training since their early teens. But what he lacked in experience, he made up for in raw talent and an unshakable determination. His first coach recognized something special in him, a connection to his indigenous roots that seemed to fuel his fighting spirit. Alex's ancestors were warriors, and he carried that legacy in his blood. The more he trained, the more he felt connected to something greater than himself, as if the spirits of his forebears were guiding his every move. Alex's journey in kickboxing was far from easy. He faced countless challenges, both inside and outside the ring. The sport demanded discipline, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment, qualities that Alex had to cultivate through sheer willpower. But with every fight, he grew stronger, more confident, and more determined to prove himself. His amateur career was marked by an impressive record of 28 wins, 25 of which were by knockout. Yet despite his success, Alex was still struggling financially. Kickboxing was his passion, but it wasn't paying the bills. The turning point came when Alex turned professional, enjoying glory kickboxing at the age of 26. It was here that he began to make a name for himself, showcasing his devastating knockout power and earning the respect of his peers. His debut in glory was a statement to the world. Alex Pereira was a force to be reckoned with. But even as his career gained momentum, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was destined for something greater. He wanted to be more than just a kickboxing champion. He wanted to leave a lasting legacy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Israel Adesanya was carving out his own path in combat sports. A former dancer with a flair for the dramatic, Adesanya brought a unique style and charisma to the fight game. Like Alex, he had a late start in martial arts, but his natural talent and creativity quickly set him apart. Adesanya's rise in the UFC was meteoric, and it wasn't long before he became one of the biggest stars in the sport. But his journey was far from over, and his path would soon cross with Alex's in a way that would change both of their lives forever. The first meeting between Alex and Adesanya took place in the kickboxing ring, and it was a clash of titans. Alex's raw power and precision were pitted against Adesanya's speed and technical prowess. The fight was a brutal display of skill and determination, with both fighters pushing each other to their limits. In the end, it was Alex who emerged victorious, delivering a knockout blow that left Adesanya stunned. It was a moment that would forever define their rivalry, setting the stage for future battles. But their story didn't end there. Adesanya, determined to avenge his loss, continued to rise through the ranks of the UFC, eventually becoming the middleweight champion. Alex, on the other hand, remained in glory kickboxing, where he achieved unprecedented success, becoming the first fighter to hold titles in two weight divisions simultaneously. Despite their different paths, the rivalry between Alex and Adesanya continued to simmer, fueled by their mutual respect. Alex Pereira is one of the most dangerous strikers to ever step into the world of combat sports. His dominance, precision, and sheer knockout power have earned him a place among the greatest fighters in history. When he steps into the ring, his opponents know they are facing a force unlike any other. With devastating leg kicks that cripple his adversaries and a left hook so powerful that it sends them into another dimension, Pereira's reputation was built on destruction. It took him just 7 fights to make history, becoming a 2-division UFC champion faster than anyone before him. But his path to greatness wasn't a smooth one. His journey began in hardship, a struggle against inner demons, and an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. From a young age, Alex Pereira was no stranger to adversity. Growing up in Brazil, he found himself battling a powerful enemy, alcohol. Even as a teenager, he was drawn into a world of drinking, struggling to find purpose. But fate had other plans for him. In an attempt to break free from his destructive habits, he stepped into a kickboxing gym, a decision that would change his life forever. The moment he felt the impact of his own punches, the rush of combat, and the discipline of martial arts, he knew he had found his true calling. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about survival, about proving to himself and the world that he was destined for something greater. Within just a year of training, Pereira stepped into the ring as an amateur kickboxer. From the moment the first bell rang, it was clear he was special. He didn't just defeat his opponents, he obliterated them. His knockouts were so brutal that they left audiences in shock. His coach saw his potential early on, giving him the nickname Poatan, meaning hands of stone. It wasn't just a name, it was a prophecy. Every punch he threw carried the force of a sledgehammer, and as he transitioned into professional kickboxing, that power only became more refined. In 2012, he entered a high-stakes kickboxing tournament, where he had to fight twice in one night. For most fighters, that would be a grueling challenge. For Pereira, it was just another opportunity to showcase his dominance. His path to greatness continued with each fight. In August 2013, he competed for the Pan American kickboxing title against a formidable opponent, Israel Adesanya. It was a battle of skill, will, and power. Pereira's knees to the body were like battering rams, breaking down his opponent's defenses until he could land the final blow. A devastating right cross that sealed his victory. The tournament-based format of kickboxing was relentless, pushing fighters to their physical and mental limits. But for Pereira, it was a proving ground. He entered 3 back-to-back tournaments, facing some of the best strikers in the world. He suffered setbacks, including a controversial loss to Cesar Almeida, but those moments only fueled his hunger for victory. His breakthrough came when he entered the Glory Middleweight Contender Tournament. He dismantled his opponents, knocking out Dustin Jacoby in spectacular fashion. Jacoby had never been finished before, but Pereira's left hook changed that. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. He followed this with a grueling fight against Sahak Priyan, pushing himself to the limits to secure victory. By the end of the night, Pereira had won the tournament and cemented his place among the elite. But the biggest challenge of his career was just around the corner. A rivalry that would define his legacy. His kickboxing career soared. He defended his Glory Middleweight title multiple times, dispatching opponents with ruthless efficiency. His highlight reel knockouts left fans in awe. But as he dominated the middleweight division, he grew restless. He wanted more. He moved up to light heavyweight, challenging the reigning champion Donegi Abina. It was a war, but Pereira's power was the great equalizer. A knee to the body, followed by his signature left hook, and history was made. Pereira became the first fighter in Glory's history to hold 2 titles in 2 different weight classes simultaneously. His legacy in kickboxing was sealed, but a new challenge awaited him in the world of mixed martial arts. Pereira had dabbled in MMA years earlier, but now he was ready to commit fully. He knew the transition wouldn't be easy. Kickboxing and MMA were 2 different beasts. His grappling had to improve, his takedown defense had to be elite, and he had to prepare for an entirely different type of opponent. But Pereira was never one to back down from a challenge. His UFC debut came against Andreas Michailidis. The world was watching, wondering if the kickboxing phenom could hang with elite mixed martial artists. The first round tested him. Michailidis took him down and controlled him on the ground. But Pereira remained composed. The moment he found space, he unleashed a flying knee that sent Michailidis crashing to the canvas. His UFC career had begun with a bang. Fight after fight, Pereira proved he was more than just a kickboxer. He developed his takedown defense, refined his striking for MMA, and climbed the ranks at an unprecedented pace. His knockout of Sean Strickland was a warning to the division. His power was just as devastating with 4-ounce gloves. But the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. UFC 281, the rematch against Israel Adesanya, this time for the undisputed middleweight championship. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The fight was a war. Adesanya, now a dominant UFC champion, looked sharper than ever. In the first round, he nearly finished Pereira, rocking him with a brutal combination. But Pereira survived. He regrouped, adjusted, and by the 5th round, he was hunting Adesanya down. His corner told him he needed a knockout, and he delivered. A flurry of strikes against the cage, and the referee stepped in. Pereira had done the impossible. He had conquered 2 sports, defeated his greatest rival, and ascended to the top of the combat world. The story of Alex Pereira is one of resilience, power, and destiny. From the streets of Brazil to the bright lights of the UFC, he has faced every challenge head-on. With 2 UFC titles to his name and an unparalleled legacy in kickboxing, his journey is far from over. What lies ahead? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Whenever Alex Pereira steps into the ring, the world watches in awe, waiting for the next chapter in the story of the world's most dangerous striker.